The French president arrives in Al-Arish city in Egypt's northern Sinai. Macron visits Al-Arish hospital to assess the conditions of the wounded Palestinians. And thousands of Egyptians gather in Al-Arish in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and French President Emmanuel Macron have arrived in Al-Arish in northern Sinai. The visit included touring Gaza aid warehouses and Al-Arish hospital, where wounded Palestinians are being treated. Thousands of Egyptians gathered to welcome the two leaders, voicing their firm stance against the forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza and supporting Egypt's historical stance with regards to Palestine and Palestinian rights. The visit reflects Egypt's strong commitment to supporting Palestinians amid the ongoing crisis. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and French President Emmanuel Macron have visited Al-Arish hospital to assess the medical condition of the wounded Palestinians. The tour also included Gaza aid warehouses. Thousands of Egyptians gathered in Al-Arish to welcome the two leaders, voice their rejection of the displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, and to express support for Egypt's stance on Palestine. The visit highlights Egypt's unwavering commitment to supporting the Palestinian cause. Thousands of Egyptians have gathered in Al-Arish, an Egyptian city in northern Sinai, close to the border with Gaza, to show support for the Palestinian cause and express their rejection of the forced displacement of the Palestinian people from Gaza. The masses conveyed messages of support to Egypt's leadership regarding its stance on displacement. The demonstrators called for an immediate ceasefire and the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. At Al-Arish, northern Sinai, in Egypt, thousands of citizens from North Sinai and other Egyptian governorates have gathered along the Arish International Airport Road, waving the Egyptian flags and holding banners in support of President al-Sisi. Slogans like "We are all behind the president" and "We support our political leadership in protecting the nation's borders" were actually displayed, alongside welcome signs for President Macron. The visit highlights the importance of the Egyptian-French cooperation to support a humanitarian corridor to Gaza and assist in delivering aid amid the ongoing Israeli aggression. This visit also reinforces Egypt's commitment to protecting its territory and advocating for a fair, comprehensive resolution to the Palestinian issue. Egypt and France are deepening their political, economic and regional cooperation, focusing on key issues such as the Palestinian displacement, Gaza's reconstruction, regional stability and much more.
Egypt and France continue to deepen their political, economic and regional cooperation, from defense and infrastructure to climate action and diplomacy. Both countries have consistently aligned on key issues affecting the Middle East, Africa, and the Mediterranean region. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and French President Emmanuel Macron reaffirmed their unified stance against the displacement of Palestinians and any attempts to annex Gaza or the occupied West Bank. President Macron voiced his strong support for the Egypt-prepared Arab-Islamic plan to reconstruct Gaza for efforts to revive the peace process based on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. President El-Sisi confirmed that Egypt will host an international conference on Gaza reconstruction once the Israeli war ends. Both leaders stressed the urgency of coordinating efforts to end the violence and address the worsening humanitarian crisis. The two presidents also discussed broader regional issues, including developments in Syria, Lebanon, Sudan, and the Sahel and Horn of Africa, emphasizing their joint commitment to regional stability and unity. They called for the full implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and expressed support for Lebanon's newly elected government. Water security was also on the agenda, with President El-Sisi reiterating Egypt's position on the Nile River as a vital national lifeline, emphasizing cooperation among Nile Basin countries under international law. On economic ties, both leaders pledged to strengthen Egyptian-French relations, highlighting the upcoming Egyptian-French Economic Forum and increased French investments in Egypt. They also committed to expanding cooperation in railway manufacturing, vocational training, AI, cybersecurity, and green hydrogen. Migration was a key topic, with Macron praising Egypt for hosting over 9 million refugees and pledging continued support to combat illegal migration. President El-Sisi welcomed EU's approval for the €4 billion aid package, calling for its swift release. The visit culminated in the signing of multiple agreements and MOUs, marking a new chapter in strategic cooperation between Cairo and Paris. As Egypt and France strengthened their strategic alliance, both nations reaffirmed their commitment to peace, stability, and shared prosperity across the region.
France has played a prominent role in advocating for Palestinian rights throughout the ongoing Gaza conflict, from calling for ceasefires to condemning Israeli actions and freezing arms shipments. France's position has consistently focused on humanitarian concerns. And for more analysis on this visit, we now move to Rana Al-Assas in our newsroom. Rana.
Thank you so much, Hani. And for further analysis on the French president's visit to Egypt's Al-Arish city today, we're joined from Cairo by the international relations specialist, Dr. Mohammed Osman. A very warm welcome, Dr. Mohammed Osman, to Qnews, and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rana.
It's always a pleasure, sir. Sir, after a landmark summit Presidents Sisi and Macron visit Al-Arish. How does this reflect on both nations' increasingly aligned positions with regards to the war in Gaza?
Thank you again for having me, Rana. Always a pleasure to be with you. Of course, what we are seeing today is basically an extension and a reflection of what happened yesterday between President Al-Sisi and President Macron, and as well as the King of Jordan, King Abdullah II. The three leaders have expressed and have united and aligned their positions with regards to three major themes with regards to the situation in the Gaza Strip. The first one is the necessity of an immediate ceasefire and cessation of hostilities in the Gaza Strip, as well, of course, as a detainee exchange agreement. The second thing they have agreed upon was the complete and utter rejection of any displacement schemes or plan or proposals that were actually proposed by President Trump, the United States, and endorsed, of course, and supported by the government of the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu. And the third thing that was agreed upon by the three leaders was the necessity of reconstructing the Gaza Strip within the framework of the Arab-Egyptian reconstruction plan that entails the reconstruction without the departure of the indigenous inhabitants of the Gaza Strip, namely the Palestinians. And of course, preparing the Gaza Strip for the day after the war, or the post-war arrangements, which should include the return of the Palestinian Authority to the Gaza Strip. So this is basically yesterday's summit crystallized a united stance with regards to a fair resolution to the crisis in Gaza. Today, it's basically a follow-up of yesterday's summit. President Macron and President Al-Sisi go to Al-Arish, barely 50 kilometers away from the border with Gaza. They are there to visit certain facilities. The French field
Dr. Mohammed, I just wanted to interrupt you and ask you a question, please. Sir, the impact of the trilateral summit that took place yesterday, including, of course, Jordanian King Abdullah II. The impact of this summit on the visit that took place also when Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, the Israeli Prime Minister, is in the Washington with Donald Trump. Do you think, sir, there was an impact of this summit on the visit and of the discussions that took place between both leaders?
I think there was an impact in the sense that during the American-Israeli summit, the second summit between Netanyahu and Trump, a call was conducted between President Al-Sisi, President Macron, and King Abdullah with President Trump on the margins of both summits, which happened in tandem in both Cairo and in Washington, D.C. And of course, both summits are adopting completely different agendas as we can imagine. However, it does signify that what was going on in Cairo yesterday was of extreme importance, that Donald Trump felt that it was necessary for him to listen to the insights of the presidents of Egypt, France, and the King of Jordan, and that he should take their insights into perspective while discussing the Gaza issue and the situation in the Middle East at large with Benjamin Netanyahu. Whether this will yield any tangible changes to the American position, I think it's way too early to say, and so far from the indicators, it's highly unlikely that this will happen. However, of course, nothing is impossible. Any space for dialogue between the different parties of any certain disagreement or any certain crisis is always a healthy sign and a good sign that there is room for negotiation, that there is room for diplomatic resolutions and reaching common understandings, of course, within the context of and the framework of international law, namely international humanitarian law, the UN Charter, and international human rights law.
Hopefully, sir. Sir, how do you interpret the symbolism behind the leaders' tour of Gaza aid warehouses and the visit to Al-Arish hospital, sir?
I think that it symbolizes the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. So on the one side, we see the French president going to visit the field hospital, the Al-Arish hospital, in order to see for himself wounded Palestinian civilians who were wounded by Israel's act of aggression. There are thousands of Palestinians who came to seek treatment in Egypt who were wounded by Israel's war of aggression and Israel's relentless bombing of the Gaza Strip for the past year and a half. President Macron going and visiting this health medical facility signifies that he acknowledges the dire humanitarian situation, the dire consequences of Israel's criminal actions, and it will also send the message that this needs to stop for international public opinion. And his visit to the warehouses that are housing the aid that is designated for Gaza from various countries, including France, he is looking at how the aid is piling up in Egyptian warehouses and in Al-Arish airport and in the city of Al-Arish in general, unable to reach the Gaza Strip because of Israel's blockade on the Gaza Strip, which has been going on for over 40 days now. For over 40 days, not even a loaf of bread has entered the Gaza Strip, and the humanitarian situation over there is on the cusp of collapse. They are on the verge of a new famine in the Gaza Strip. There is no energy, there is no fuel, there is no medicine, there is nothing. So I think when the French president goes and visits these warehouses, he conveys a message that the border crossings have to be reopened by Israel because they were shuttered by the Israeli government, and that they need to facilitate once more the flow of aid from Egypt into the Gaza Strip in order to save the dying population and the suffering population of Gaza.
Dr. Mohammed, thousands of Egyptians have rallied in Al-Arish as the Egyptian and French leaders conduct their visit to the city. What messages do those demonstrations wish to convey, sir?
The Egyptian people are rallying in Al-Arish now, as we speak, thousands of them, and this is not the first time. We have seen that in the previous Eid al-Fitr prayers. Spontaneous demonstrations broke out all over Egypt. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people rallied in the streets to convey the same message. And before that, on many, many occasions in different cities in Cairo, the people of Egypt go to the street to send a straightforward message. We are fully in support of the two-state solution. We fully support the decisions and the stance of the Egyptian political leadership, and especially the position of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi with regards to the Palestinian cause, namely his utter rejection of the forced displacement of Palestinians due to the hazards this poses to the survival of the Palestinian cause and to Egyptian national security. The Egyptian people are trying to show President Macron that the position President al-Sisi is taking is basically a reflection of the popular will of the Egyptian people, that this is the will of the Egyptian people, that this is the conviction of the Egyptian people, that the Palestinian cause should always be preserved and protected, and that it is Egypt's historical duty to undertake its role in preserving the Palestinian cause, and of course, namely by preventing its liquidation by the United States and by Israel at this point. So I think this will factor into influencing Macron's position and the position of the French state in general. And already France has adopted this stance. France opposes the displacement and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Gaza, supports the two-state solution, and supports the Egyptian plan for reconstruction.
Dr. Osman, could you further elaborate, sir, on the French and Egyptian positions increasingly aligned on a formula for conflict resolution in Gaza? And will this enhance the chances of mediating a new ceasefire deal, sir?
As we know, Egypt is a key mediator in the conflict in Gaza. Egypt, along with Qatar, of course, and Egypt plays this very prominent role, which makes it which basically gives it a central role in the events going on in Gaza right now, and of course a positive role as opposed to the role of the United States and of course Israel, which is a party to the conflict. So in Egypt's role as a mediator, there is value and there is weight, and this is what the French understand, and this is why the French president came to Egypt in order to for him to pitch in an attempt to give input or contribute to the efforts of attempting to resolve the conflict in Gaza. And he knows that through Egypt is the most logical gateway from which he can contribute and enhance France's position as a global power and a major power broker in the European Union, because basically France came representing European interests in this regard. So I think that both leaders now have formulated a united stance that calls for an immediate ceasefire, a restoration of the ceasefire agreement that was agreed upon and that went on successfully for over 57 days before being unilaterally terminated by the Israeli government. The ceasefire agreement said that it has 3 stages for detainee exchange, for the facilitation of humanitarian aid, for the withdrawal of the Israeli forces from Gaza, and also for the removal of Hamas from power and the replacement with a communal support committee that was supposed to be a transitional administration that paves the way for the return of the Palestinian Authority, which is basically the representative of the state of Palestine and the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people in the Argentine international community. So this was the Egyptian plan, a plan in line with international law and in line with basic morals. And I think that the... Yes,
go ahead, sir. Sorry.
And just one final sentence, and I think that the French position aligning with the Egyptian position is basically aligning with the position that is on the right side of history.
Sir, in light of yesterday's Egyptian-French summit, can Paris mobilize the European Union to apply more pressure on Israel to end its humanitarian blockade on Gaza and agree to a long-term ceasefire?
I think we cannot outrule that. I think that France now has an opportunity to play a much more proactive role in resolving the situation in Gaza, and this can only happen through applying pressure on Israel. So far, the only country that has been able to apply pressure on Israel in the global major powers was the United States, and it's not applying any pressure anymore, unfortunately. So now it's Europe's turn. Europe is one of the major trade partners of Israel. They have always been a key political supporter of Israel, and they even contribute arms and they arm the Israeli military. So if they decide to factor in these tools and try to impose pressure on Israel through threatening sanctions or even imposing sanctions, economic sanctions on Israel, just like they did on Russia, for example, for much lesser crimes than what the Israelis are doing right now, if we can even call what Russia did as crimes that are comparable to what the Israelis are doing. If they actually do that, then we might actually see a qualitative alteration of the balance of power in the calculus of the Gaza conflict, and of course this change will be more favorable and a potent force that will support all efforts to restore peace in the Gaza Strip.
Of course, Dr. Mohammed, because we're running out of time, I see that your narrative is very optimistic, hopeful to reach a resolution and a ceasefire again. After all we've witnessed throughout the past 2 days, which of course makes us all Egyptians and proud. We thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Osman, the International Relations Specialist. Always thankful for your valuable informative knowledge. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. And now we go back to Hani Saif in our studios.
Thank you, Rana. Ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinian presidency has stated that the Israeli plan to establish the so-called Moraj axis aimed at separating the Palestinian side of Rafah from the rest of Gaza violates all international legal decisions and conventions. They emphasize that Gaza is an integral part of the Palestinian territories occupied in 1967, condemning Israeli plans that seek to expand settlement policies and undermine Palestinian sovereignty. These are all the news we have for now, but here's a reminder of today's main stories. The French president arrives in Al-Arish city in Egypt's northern Sinai. Macron visits Al-Arish hospital to assess the conditions of the wounded Palestinians. And thousands of Egyptians gather in Al-Arish in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.